Hey everybody, and welcome to Tier 5 Part 2 of the Iceberg. Sorry for the bit of the hiatus. I saw some were concerned, and no, I'm not dead. With the holidays, I've been doing a lot of traveling, seeing family, stuff like that, but now I am back in the command center and ready to get this through. So I hope you enjoy, and as always, thank you for watching. Mental problems theory is one of those that's kind of vague and it could have different meanings. Given the context for the rest of the items on this tier, I believe it's referring to the theory that those with mental issues are not actually suffering deficiencies, they are instead suffering from advanced physiology, and that whatever they're experiencing is the newfound roots of the next step in human evolution. So basically, those who experience mental illness are just using an advanced physiology than the rest of us. Highway trolls is in reference to the phenomenon that occurs whenever you're riding alone on the highway at night and begin to see things either running off the road or just out of view of your headlights. What's interesting about this specific phenomena is that several people report seeing the same things in the same areas, but it's not like a cryptid or Bigfoot as you traditionally think. Instead, it's these shared hallucinations that occur on dark roads at night, leading people to believe that while this may be a creature, it may also be a sort of fourth dimensional being that is only expressed during these sort of twilight moments. OOO, or object-oriented ontology as it's called, is in reference to a concept in metaphysics that says while we as humans constantly think of our existence in a sort of selfish way, that the natural world has to revolve around our sense of perception, that's not necessarily the case. And some things that we can't explain will never be explained because the universe doesn't conform to our understanding, if that makes sense. Also, I just want to mention this now, putting this on the iceberg as OOO made this near impossible to find, so whoever made this, thanks, appreciate it. Also, while I'm off topic, normally what I do whenever researching for these things is I will find some new board on 4chan or Reddit or something like that and just follow along until someone links like an article or an old forum page to try to find out information on some of these things. But it's gotten to the point that, for example, on 4chan, when trying to look this up, someone said, oh, don't worry, this guy right here, he'll cover it in his next video. So I go to the link and it's me, which is really cool and it means a lot. And it's so wild to think that like the places I'm using for information are now like looking to me for information, which is so cool. But at the same time, that was where I was getting the information. So, but I do want to say it really means a lot how much this channel and series has grown thanks to you all. And I can't thank you enough. So it really does mean a lot. Anyway, back to the theories. Arizona Ghost Radio is in reference to a supposedly unmanned radio program that occurs in the desert around Phoenix, Arizona. What's odd about this program is no one can find the exact person who is mandating it or putting out the songs on it, and furthermore, all the songs put out are non-known sort of background records from popular bands. Also, there's no advertisements on the radio station, and the only indication of anything on it besides music is every couple hours there will be a loop that names itself as 103.1 KCDX. But other than that, no one knows who it is, and it seems to be just an empty radio station in the desert with no known source. Windshield pitting epidemic, or the Seattle windshield pitting epidemic, is in reference to a phenomenon that occurred in Seattle in 1954. Beginning in Seattle, people at the same time began to notice that their cars had small holes in the windshield. This was such a problem that people within small neighborhoods began all reporting the same problem, and theories range from nuclear testing to sand flea eggs to hail falling from the sky. What was interesting was that no other windows on the car were damaged, nor the houses or any other piece of glass, just the windshields of people's cars. On top of that, this then spread from Seattle to down the coast all the way into California. This became such an issue that Dwight D. Eisenhower, the then president, was even contacted over it in order to try to find some explanation for this. Police were called out on more than 15,000 calls for windshield damage, with a reported 3,000 of them being absolutely confirmed to be true. And while no one knows to this day exactly what happened, the primary theory behind it is that it was just a case of mass delusion, that one person heard that someone's windshield was damaged, so then they noticed their windshield being damaged. But was it at such a scale and people all over the country began to realize that, oh no, my windshield's got holes in it for some reason? I don't know, it's a weird one, kind of hard to explain. North Korea ghost ships. is in reference to the fact that every year off the coast of Japan, about a dozen ships that seem to be from North Korea wash up on the shore with either a dead crew or a completely missing crew. Theories range from everything to alien abduction to sea monster attacks, but it's odd that all these ships keep leaving, are never accounted for, and then will one day just wash up on the shores of Japan with a completely dead or missing crew inside. Also, not to tie in my own theories on this tier, but that's the exact same area that the bloop was heard from, so Neodinosaurs, or new dinosaurs, is simply in reference to the fact that there are several new species of animals that have very strong similarities to extinct dinosaur species. This is either evidence that all dinosaurs didn't necessarily die out, they simply adapted, or the idea that some species thought to be extinct may be living somewhere else on Earth or somewhere else in Earth, as certain theories propose. Human hunting is exactly what it says. It is the fact that throughout history there have been cultures that have prided themselves on hunting humans for sport, everything from the Colosseum to ancient Aztecs. The theory goes a step forward and says that modern day elites are still doing it in their super secret areas and forests and things such as simply a form of blood sport or ritual sacrifice. Teeth implants at birth actually has two theories on it. One of which being that whenever you are born, doctors implant baby teeth into you in order to do something, I guess. Whereas the more common belief is at birth, doctors mess with your molar joints in order to cause wisdom teeth problems later in life, in order to create a triangle of money in which you have to pay to get wisdom teeth, from paying to be born in a hospital and blah blah blah, healthcare bad. But furthermore, people cite this as an explanation as to why not everyone needs their wisdom teeth removed. Stuxnet revival studies is in reference to the Stuxnet computer virus. The virus was used against Iran's nuclear weapon program in 2009, and although there's no direct evidence of it, it's believed that the virus itself was a joint operation between Israel and the United States. The virus essentially wiped out Iran's weapons program, but now that that virus is out there, there are theories that specific groups of hackers or countries are trying to revive that virus in order to use it on separate world systems and potentially destroy an entire city's economy or infrastructure using a line of code. Urine fasting is exactly what it says, that there are properties to urine that can be partaked of. And I don't want to talk about this anymore. TSUKI is in reference to the TSUKI procedure that popped up in 2017 on 4chan. In 2017, a user by the name of TSUKI popped up on 4chan and began telling people that they were giving away these sort of entry passes to escape the system space. According to them, we do not live in the correct reality, and every time that you die, you ascend one reality up if you follow a certain number of steps. TSUKI was offering a way to the next step, and they considered what we were in now to be the system space. Therefore, if you do what TSUKI says, whenever you die, and without killing yourself, because that was stressed several times, you would then go up to the next tier. This is another one of those we live in a simulation, the world is not real theories that come from this specific user. Accelerationism is a political philosophy that goes off the idea that things are going to continuously work in cycles, so things will get worse before they get better, essentially, and that the best form of action while we are capable is to make things worse now so that we can hurry on to the rebuilding process. So essentially, if there is an economic system that is causing trouble in a country, the best thing to do is to accelerate that system as fast as you can and hurry up and get to the collapse so that you can work towards the rebuilding. The Omphalos is believed by ancient Greeks to be the center of the world. According to legend, Zeus sent two hawks from either side of the world to fly towards the middle at equal speeds, and they met each other over Delphi, meaning that Delphi was the center of the world. According to legend, Zeus placed this rock, or the navel of the world as it was called, at the temple of Delphi, and the oracles then used it for ancient spells. Examining the rock now reveals that there are air passageways up the rock, meaning that it was most likely used to smoke stuff out of and receive spiritual experiences, so go figure. Sticking to the Greeks, Greek magnetic sky is in reference to the fact that most of the Greek architecture we see, such as temples and state houses, are all angled or sort of drifting in a way towards their magnetic field, and it lies in such a way that all of the stars and solar bodies can be seen from certain hilltops in Greece, implying that there was an extraordinary amount of astronomical architecture that went into these buildings, or aliens. The theory is saying that's aliens because of course it is. Quantum entanglement is a very sort of hard to understand concept. I'm going to do my best to explain it in an easy way. So if you'll remember how I mentioned quantum suicide in tier 2 and how small particles react differently to things in the real world, quantum entanglement is in reference to the idea that when two of these microscopic particles come together, they sort of act as one particle. So therefore, things that are amassed together will begin acting as if they are one unit instead of several, and their quantum mechanics become entangled. So take that a step further and apply it to humans when it comes to things like string theory, and then you may realize that maybe you, the individual, are not the one that is acting in your own quantum field, but your own planet or your universe even is acting in its own sort of quantum direction. This is a step further in the thought concept that we do not have agency of ourselves and are instead subject to whatever others or even the universe does around us. Dr. Robert Morse became famous with his theories of veganism when it comes to correct diets and detoxing. However, what he is most known for is pioneering the idea of iridology, which is that you can look at someone's eyes and from the way that their eyes are formed and imperfections in it, tell everything from what diseases they have to what they are lacking in their nutritional diet. Currently, it's still considered a form of pseudoscience. However, there are people, including Robert Morse, who firmly believe that the secrets to the human body can be seen simply by looking into the eye. Ethnopsychiatry is exactly what it says, the idea that different ethnicities and cultures have different psychiatric effects in their brain and therefore need to be treated differently. However, you can apply this to a sort of historical view and say that the reason these different groups have different thought patterns is because of historical events that have occurred to them. This is very similar to the toxoplasmosis thing that I mentioned in whatever tier that was, where I said that this specific parasite has changed the course of human history. Well, take the parasite out of it and imagine that people have been changed over the course of history because of events that have happened to them, and therefore entire countries or ethnicities because of the psychological effects that have happened to them over time. Harmonic Sync is in reference to the fact that all sound waves give off a frequency, and that if two frequencies are matching each other, one can sort of become invisible under the other. This is both a concept when it comes to hidden messages and other weird MK Ultra experiments, but can also be used as a way to sort of manipulate the mind or even damage it, as I mentioned before in the Havana incident, where sound waves supposedly broke people's minds. It could have been done using this method. Report from Iron Mountain was a book that was published from the perspective of a panel of government agents who were giving secret information of government proceedings to the population. In the book, it said that it was determined by government higher-ups that in order to maintain power and peace, that there always needed to be a state of war, because using that or disease or some other form of terror, the government can continue to assert itself for control. Theories about this book range from everything to this is a very good take and sort of satirical look at how the government works, to people who literally believe that it is an actual 15 group of government panelists who released this book against their higher-ups' wishes. USSR never collapsed is in reference to the idea that the supposed fall of the USSR in '91 at the end of the Cold War was instead just a ruse to divert attention away from the Red Scare. Evidence of this comes from the ideas that the US never verified that the USSR was gone, or that if you look at countries around the region at the time, there doesn't seem to be any change of government or celebration other than stuff that could be superficial. And furthermore, the US never deployed any troops or any stations in Russia, so it's sort of this idea that it was an understanding between countries in order to point attention somewhere else. Kundalini Energy is a concept in Sanskrit mysticism. Similar to Ki energy and things like that from other Eastern philosophies, it's the idea that someone can embody this ethereal energy around them, but Kundalini energy goes a step forward and says that they can manifest it in their real world life in order to perform certain tasks or functions, so basically a sort of hidden power that the user can call upon. Brain in a jar, or brain in a vat as it's often called, is the now sort of well-known idea that if you were to take a human brain out of the body and hook it up to a computer, and in that computer was a simulation of the real world, there is no possible way for that brain to figure out that it is not itself in a simulation. This relates back to the whole concept of I think, therefore I am, and that nothing can absolutely be known besides your own thought process, because everything could simply be a simulation. Universe People was a cult that originated in Europe in the 90s. This cult was sort of your standard ideas of UFO and crazy mysticism. It had ideas from biblical philosophy and Eastern philosophy, and simply explained that figures like Jesus were extraterrestrials throughout history. They faced a lot of scrutiny after the suicide of the Heaven's Gate cult in the United States and supposedly disbanded. However, there's theories that several influential people in European politics are secretly a member of this cult, and they are planning for some grandiose whatever cults do. The Ummo Case is one of the more well-known events when it comes to extraterrestrials. In the 1960s, 15 people around Spain began receiving these letters claiming to be that of alien life. According to these letters, they didn't want to make their presence known to man and simply had questions about how humans operate. These letters correctly identified several military events that were not known to the public that occurred in the decades leading up to these letters' messages, and even said that they found Earth because of signals being sent by a Norwegian tanker in 1934, which it was later proven had actually happened. According to these extraterrestrials, they were simply interested in how life worked on Earth and were very interested in concepts such as art, and after short correspondence with these 15 people, they all simply vanished. Segregated Internet is in reference to the fact that there are obviously segregations on the internet depending on race or ethnicity and religion. However, the theory goes a step further and says that these are purposeful segregations given by the elites or higher ups in order to keep people segregated from each other and therefore continue to build up animosity towards each other so that people don't become a collective and look towards the real issues, i.e. the ones causing it. Symbiogenesis is a rather well-known concept in biology. As a matter of fact, it is the theory of how the mitochondria came to be, and it is the idea that certain biological organisms over time have began to adopt other biological organisms as part of their mainframe and continue to evolve with them. The reason for the mitochondria I mentioned earlier is because mitochondria always have a different DNA than the cell they're inside of, implying at one point that it was an entirely separate organism. This theory goes a step further and says it's happened with much more macro creatures, and even goes to say that perhaps the reason for human sudden evolution throughout our timeline of existence was because we began to absorb other creatures. So yeah, that's a nice thought. The Antikythera Mechanism is regarded as many as the first analog computer. Estimated to be made around 100 BC, it was a complex system of 36 bronze gears that turned in such a way that, from what we can tell now, was made to resemble the passage of the moon and even predict abnormalities in the moon, such as eclipses and things such as. What's interesting is, given the time, this is much more advanced than anything else the Greeks had invented, with some even stating that the inside of it looks like a clock. The Gedi Ruins are a series of ruins found on the coast of Kenya in the 1920s. What's interesting about these ruins is, while there's no exact history of who made them, it seems to be a massive trading station for the maritime people of the Somalia coast. However, there's no clear example of why these ruins became abandoned, especially considering that at the time that they would have been vacated, surrounding areas were much more impoverished than them, so it makes no sense as to why people would just leave the city empty. However, local tribes say that the ruins hold what they know as the Old Ones, or spirits of ancient priests who began to run off people and demanded that the city be kept for themselves. So to this day, it's sort of known as a haunted ruins that if you do approach, you must approach with caution. Theosophist Geology comes from the idea of Theosophism, which is very closely related to Gnosticism, which I'm going to have to make a deeper dive. I mentioned it like 12 times at this point. Theosophism is essentially a combination of several world religions, everything from Judaism to Nazism and everything in between, that says that truth and understanding are at the heart of every religion, and therefore there's something to be pulled out of every religion and hunt for the truth. Where this comes into geology is the idea that both rocks as they are found on Earth can hold these sort of secret meanings and hidden truths, and the idea of catastrophism, which is basically the idea that the world itself was formed through catastrophes, and that without catastrophes, true meaning cannot be known. It's sort of a really deep philosophy that's hard to explain in such a short amount of time, but basically the idea that rocks hold hidden value, and from that we can find the true meaning of existence. Anatta is a concept from Buddhism and says that there is no soul as we understand it or self of a person, and instead you yourself or anyone is the manifestation of the spirits or the world interacting around them. In other words, you yourself are not independent and your own creature. You are simply an amalgamation of the universe's energy around you. 40th tithe was kind of hard to find any solid information on. The closest thing I could is the concept of teruma, which is a practice mentioned in Exodus in the Bible that's still carried out by several sort of more Jewish traditions. But it's the idea that the priest of whatever temple or system that you're under deserve 1/40th of your earnings to provide for themselves directly. Now, this has been used in a modern sense in much more nefarious ways, and all the information I could find on it sort of hints at priests and pastors using this to sort of steal money from their people beyond what they're already giving. But essentially the concept that higher ups in religion are demanding a percentage of your wealth for them specifically instead of necessarily the work of God. Polywater was a theory that was derived by Russian scientists in the 80s, and it's the idea that by running water through capillary tubes over and over, you can create a sort of mini water, which is just water compressed in the same space that one water molecule would normally be, creating a sort of thick, viscous type of water that both has a higher boiling point and lower freezing point, as well as containing more hydrogen and oxygen given its surface area. While since this has been sort of proven as pseudoscience, the theory goes to say that Russia invented it as a sort of way to invigorate their troops because you could get the same sustenance out of water in a much smaller amount, meaning that preservations were easier to carry. Furthermore, it goes on to say that Russia has beat us scientifically in more ways than the US would like to think. HGP defunded is in reference to the Human Genome Project. From 1990 to 2003, a collaboration of the world's best scientists were put together in something called the Human Genome Project. The purpose of this was to determine the properties of the base pairs of DNA that all DNA was made up of, or basically the GCAT that pretty much everyone's familiar with now. While officially the HGP was ended in 2003 because it was simply complete, the theory says that they instead lost funding and research was made up in order to make the public think that everything went well, and a lot of our understanding about DNA base pairs is simply filler for what they were unable to accomplish. BDORT, or bidigital O-ring test, is a sort of alternative diagnosing method in which the patient puts their fingers together in an O-ring shape, and depending on what the best method is to pull it apart, the doctor can diagnose either their dietary downsides or what diseases they have. It's very similar to iridology, in which it is a very uncouth way of determining people's health problems through a sort of pseudoscience analysis. The cosmic butterfly and Rosalind Ballingall is in reference to an event that happened around the University of Cape Town in 1969. At the university, there was a rather well-known group of hippies or anti-war protesters known as the cosmic butterfly. From all the research I could find, they were your standard, free love, anti-war peace movement. Nearby, the majority of them lived at a place known as the Sugar House Commune. One of these was a girl from the UK known as Rosalind Ballingall. One day, according to witnesses, she got a Bible, which she took on a walk into the woods and was never seen again. Now, there are several weird sort of events surrounding this. For example, why would she, being as anti-religious as the group was known to be, take a Bible with her on a walk into the woods? Furthermore, whenever the family has been tried to be contacted about this event, they refuse to speak on it, as well as local police, who also, I should mention, have lost the police report since it's happened. Also, stories about the day specifically get kind of odd. For example, Rosalind's friends, who supposedly passed her on the way, said that she was staring off in the distance in a sort of trance and just continued walking. Also, her boyfriend, who was the only person who did not help in the search and rescue party, simply sat back at the front steps of their house and played the flute as everyone else looked for her. I should also mention, the garden that she walked into is known as the Garden of Eden and is famous for several occult practicing and rituals that have occurred there. Since then, there have been several reports that as people drive through the area, they see a girl matching Rosalind's description in the back seat of their car, and even stories of children freaking out saying that there's someone sitting in the back seat with them. Theory says that Rosalind was under the influence of a cult and used as a sort of sacrifice, and now her spirit haunts the woods of the Garden of Eden. And that is it for tier 5. And I just realized we are halfway done with the iceberg. And again, as I mentioned before, this is all thanks to you guys. I really, it blows my mind how well this is doing, and how when even I'm gone for family stuff and holidays, that the subscriber number keeps growing. And I have no intentions to stop. As I've mentioned before, I want to keep this up, and it's all possible thanks to you guys, and it really does mean a lot, and thank you. Thank you to all my subscribers and everyone who watched. A very special thank you to all my patrons, and a very, very special thank you to my top tier patrons. Thank you, Kayla. Thank you, Pef. Thank you, Eddie. Thank you, Benjamin. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Publius. Thank you, Saucy. Thank you, Phasia. And thank you, Steven. I'm back in the saddle. Look for more of these to come out. There will probably be a deeper dive sometime soon, so be looking forward to that. But as always, as I mentioned before, thank you for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.